Hi, I'm Judelle Niemeyer from Quiltworx.com, and this video will teach you how to make the color spectrum block. We will not be making the entire quilt, simply demonstrating the process of cutting, stacking, foundation paper piecing, and assembling the units for this pattern. If you do not have the pattern and would like to purchase it, you can find it on the Quiltworx website. It is available as both a digital download, where you need to print all of your papers and instructions on your home printer, or you can order a pattern from the regular pattern inventory, which will come in the mail with all of the foundation papers and instructions printed for you already. If you have ordered the printed version, please check for corrections on the pattern page, as there are a couple. The pattern on the cover and included in your digital download requires that you make 120 blocks and uses 17 different background fabrics. However, in the following tutorial, Judy Niemeyer will be demonstrating using only 2 different background fabrics and showing you how to cut and stack for 12 blocks. When you are ready to make the quilt, you will need to read the instructions carefully to plan, cut, stack, and prepare your fabrics. Another option is to use Quiltster. At the end of this video, we will talk about Quiltster a bit more. There, you can find a blank line drawing of color spectrum, where you can color the blocks in a variety of ways and then rotate the blocks to create unique layouts. You can also purchase a few kits designed by Quiltworx and possibly even others in the Quiltster marketplace. Stay tuned at the end for more information. Let's get started with Judy.
Color spectrum is a beginner pattern. It's going to teach you the basics to doing paper piecing and how to go about cutting out your fabric. For this pattern, all I'm going to do is I'm going to just go through and cut out enough pieces to make 12 blocks and show you how to do the stacking and everything. So enjoy. So the first thing I'm going to do is when you get your pattern, you're going to get a whole bunch of information. We're going to skip all of that general information, and I'm just going to grab my foundation papers. And you're going to get lots of foundation papers, and on the foundation papers it has a number, and you want to make sure that you're using all of the same papers, because some patterns have different numbers on them, but if the number's the same on all of them, then that means the papers are the same. Okay? And then we also have what we call template layout sheets. This is actually a template layout sheet. It says TP, and the same thing, it's a number, but one of the things about the layout sheets is you have to cut them out individually. You can't stack them because you want to cut right on the line. And so I'll go over that really quick with you too. So we're going to start with the foundation papers. This pattern has 10 sheets. All I'm going to do is show you how to do 2 of them so that we can get it done quickly. So if you look, this says NP 664 in the corner, and the one underneath it says NP 664, okay? You can stack these. I've stacked some patterns as much as up to 17 sheets. Now you have to be a little careful and make sure that you get them stacked properly, and then I just cut them out. We have very few patterns that actually require that many sheets to cut. So what I like to do is find a flower pen, and I'm going to get one that's straight. And I like to find a spot that is easy for me to find on each sheet. And then what I'll do is I just find and put the pen in the same exact spot on each sheet and pull it together. Now your papers, all of the printing is the same exact size, but the papers, when they trim them at the print shop, they're not always the same size because they get folded, and after they're folded together, then they get trimmed. So I'm going to put a pin right there in that corner, and then I'm going to go over and find another corner, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. And then we're going to turn it around, and we're going to do the third corner. Okay. And then we're going to do the fourth corner. don't like to go and press these. I like to just lay them on top of each other and not worry about pressing, because once you start pressing, you start dealing with just a little bit of shrinkage. So I like to just lay them on top of each other. Now we're going to find a stapler, and we've got one right here. We're going to go through, and I just kind of pull on both ends where I have my pins, and then I put a staple in each block, just one. And then we're going to grab the next one, and we just continue around the whole thing. And I'm not going to staple the whole thing for you right now. After, I'm going to come over here and do this one here and this one. Right? After we get everything stapled, then we'll pull our pins out, and then we're going to grab a ruler. One thing I do want to show you is, let's say I need to staple the two here that are in the middle. What I like to do is just take and cut a hole in my paper like that, and then I can just lift my stapler right underneath there and staple those pieces together. So I get everything stapled in a group. Right. Now I'm just going to show you how I cut really quick. I like to cut around the outside and leave about 1/8 of an inch, because you never know for sure if these papers are going to stack perfectly. And then we're going to throw that paper in the garbage. And then I'm going to come over here. And again, I'm just going to slice about 1/8 of an inch outside that paper. And we'll cut these later. So I can just pull them off and get them out of the way here. And now we're going to take these pieces. We're going to slice here. How we do our foundation papers. Now that gives me 6 papers. I'm going to cut down a few more here in just a little bit. So I'm going to remove all the excess paper from my table. We're going to set those aside. So before I go cutting my layout sheets, I like to read them a little bit to see what's what. And I like to match things up in my instructions so that after I cut, I kind of know what pieces go together. All right? So if I look, this is a CS6, that's a CS6. I have a CS6 and I have a CS6, okay? And then these are actually for unit CS6. But if you look underneath there, this one says layout sheet number 1. And this one says template layout sheet. This one is number 5. So they all have different numbers. And when you cut them out, you want to keep the same numbers together, all right? Now when I cut out the layout sheets, I actually will come in and I cut right on the line because it's a single layer, all right? But sometimes I like to think ahead a little bit, and like this one, there's actually 2 here, but if I actually cut that into a rectangle, then I can cut my fabrics and stack all my rectangles, and I can have 12 layers under this one and 12 layers under that one, and it makes my cutting go a lot faster. For those of you that don't understand what a layout sheet is, basically a layout sheet is several templates together within a boundary, okay? And what you have to do is cut around this boundary. And then we set up cut lines on there that tells you which line to cut first, all right? Normally it'll say cut line 1, cut line 2, cut line 3, cut line 4. On occasion we'll find one where it will say cut line 1, cut line 1, cut line 1, cut line 1. And it's just because somewhere along the line I missed it in the proofing and didn't realize that we didn't get all of our cut lines changed, all right? But it's pretty easy to tell where you're supposed to cut. So don't come unglued if you see a paper that says cut line 1, cut line 1, cut line 1. Just cut them and be done with it, all right? You're not going to cut any of those templates apart until you actually have the fabric underneath it. So it really speeds up the cutting process, right? All you need to know about a template layout sheet right there. All right, in your instructions, when you start with your cutting the fabric, every pattern is designed a little bit different. The very first fabric that we're going to cut out is called fabric CS6-1A, okay? And in the instructions, if we go all the way up to U, the letter U on that, for today, I have an A fabric and a B fabric, so I'm going to cut out enough to do 12 blocks, all right? So that's going to be the very first piece, and it tells me here at the very beginning that what size to cut that. So if you are making your own color arrangements, cut one 7 3/4 inch by 42 inch strip for every 6 colors that for every 6 units that you're going to make, because you can get enough fabric pieces to make 6 blocks out of one strip of fabric. So we had to do the math. Basically, if I want to do 36 blocks, then I would have to have 6 different fabric strips to get those 36 blocks, okay? So what I've done here is I have enough template pieces here, and I kept this together as one unit, or one layout sheet, right? And I have 2 pieces of fabric. So I'm going to open up my fabrics and stack them right side up. So now I'm going to take this layout sheet and I'm going to put a little bit of this repositionable glue on the back side of it. And you're supposed to let that dry for about 45 seconds. And I'm a little impatient, so we're just going to slip it on there right now. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is just take this and I'm going to cut right along that line, the edge there, and then we're going to cut another one. Then all I do is pick this up, and I'm going to do another layer. Okay. Then I have another layer here. So now I have 6 layers of fabric under there, and what I'm going to do is just cut right between the middle there, like that. Then I'm going to pull one of those layout sheets off, and then I'm going to flip this piece over and set it underneath. And if doesn't match perfectly, it's okay. All right. So now I'm going to just take, and I'm going to grab 3 paper clips here, and I'm going to put a paper clip on each one of those template pieces, and I can tell because my cut lines are set in between it. Okay, so now we have that. Now I'm just going to take my ruler, and I'm going to do cut line 1, and then this one would be cut line 2, right? So I have my pieces cut for the background, so I set those aside. The next piece of fabric that I'm going to work with is for CS62, and we're going to cut out 12 pieces. If I was cutting out a lot more, then I would have several layers of my strips stacked underneath here. So I would stack as many of 12 layers if I needed that many layers of fabric, right? now then it tells me that I want to cut this strip into 2 pieces. So it's 3 1/4 inches, and I have a template piece here, and that kind of gives me what the width is. So I'm going to put some glue on here, and instead of trying to do the math on half of 3 1/4, I'm just going to lay my template layout sheet down there, and then I'm going to fold my strip, because it doesn't have to be perfect, because we're doing paper piecing. And I'm just going to lay the ruler down here, and we're going to cut along that strip. Now, I can take this strip, we're going to open it up, and we're going to start stacking our different layers on there. I can get 6 of these pieces out of one strip. So what I'm going to do here is going to cheat a little bit, and I'm going to cut it right about here. And then I'm going to take these strips, set them underneath there, and then I'm just going to go through, and before I cut those, I want to put my paper clips on. And then all I have to do is just cut them all to that size. Now if you don't want to use your paper templates like this, you can actually come in and measure that to get the size of what that is. I'm a little lazy. I like to just cut them as close to the paper template size as I can, and then I'll just take all of these pieces and stack them. All right. The next piece that we have to cut. Okay, now I'm going to work with fabric CS6, all right? So CS6 tells you to cut the cut size is 6.5 inches, okay? For this particular piece, I'm only using one color here, and I can get 12 pieces out of one strip of fabric. So like I said, I like to do shortcuts, so I think ahead. And my template has 4 different pieces on it. What I'm going to do is lay it down here in the center, and I can see that I can get 4 pieces on there. So I'm just going to cut along this edge here, give myself a little bit of room. And then we're going to open this piece up, and I'm going to stack that on top. And then I'm going to just take this, and at this point, I'm going to put my glue on there. And there's plenty of room on your templates, so don't ever feel like your layout sheets aren't big enough for you. When you're looking at a template layout sheet, you can see what the finished cut size is, and you can tell that we've added an extra 3/8 of an inch there for you to work with, all right? So now, instead of me going through and cutting a whole bunch of 1.5 inch strips, since I know that my strips of paper templates are big enough, I'm just going to come in here, and I'm going to cut this one right on that cut line. And then we're going to cut the next one. Now, where I have this extra fabric, I'm not going to worry about that because it really won't make any difference because I'm doing paper piecing and all that's going to be trimmed off. So now we're just going to stack these pieces and put one paper clip on top. All right. Now we're going to fabrics CS64. And this is a 9-inch strip, and this template layout sheet is actually says I need a 2 3/4 inch strip, okay? So I'm gonna get my ruler, and I'm gonna fold my fabric, because again, I don't have to worry about accuracy here. And I'm gonna find 2 3/4, which is right there. And I'm going to cut that 3 times. And my last cut's going to be a little bit bigger, but I'm going to just go ahead and cut it. Now I'm going to open up all my fabric, and I'm going to stack all the strips. Now let's put our repositionable glue on the back here. And put that down. And I can tell when I look at the graphics that I have enough fabric here to play with. So we're just going to take this piece here. We're going to cut down along this end. And then I'm going to cut again here. I'm going to move this over, position that on top. So we're just going to come back, and I'm going to cut between the lines. Now, one of the nice things about the repositionable glue is if I want to pull this off and put this onto another strip, I can still reuse my template pieces. I'm going to put a paper clip on this and put it over with my pile. I have one more strip here, and looking at my instructions, this is 3 3/4 inch strip, and I can read on my layout sheet that these are supposed to be 1 1/2 inch strips. So I'm gonna just take this, put some glue on the back of it. Place this about halfway. I'm going to open up my strip here. Okay. And then I'm going to fold it back. So this quilt is just so easy to cut because everything is just strips of fabric. So it's just really easy. There's no accuracy in it. I'm going to take this, cut down there, and then we're going to take this one, and it tells me that I can get 6 out of a strip, and if I look, I have 2 layers here. This is my leftover fabric, so I'm just going to put that template aside, and then we're going to stack these templates, and I have 12 pieces here. We're going to put it over there. Okay, we're going to go through the paper piecing steps, how to set up your colors, but I want to go over a couple things with the quilt. All right, our quilt actually had 17 colors. After you get everything cut, you need to go back and make sure that you sort all of your colors into one pile. So you're going to basically end up with 17 different piles there. And then you can combine some of the piles so that you can actually chain 12 pieces at a time. But you're gonna need to try to get it sorted out the best you can as far as color. I'm only working with 2 colors today. So what I have is I've sorted my pieces after they were cut. I have 6 of color A and 6 of color B, and I have them here. I have these in 2 groups of 6. I have this template, so everything's in a group of 6. And then I have 2 stacks of paper. If I was doing a big quilt, I would actually come in here and I'd number this group here and say this might be color group A, and I have to do 6 pieces. Color group B might be 12 pieces, but put down as you're sorting out your papers into groups. Number your papers so that you know that this is for color group A, color group B, color group C, and how many you're supposed to have in each one of those piles. The other thing you can do is if I want where I only have 6 and 6, I can actually come in here and I can number my papers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I could also go 7 and keep numbering down until I get down to 12. I can't even grab a hold of it right now. There we go, 12, all right? So now I can actually put this all in a pile. My first 6 pieces are gonna be here, my last 6 pieces are here. But if you number them, the nice thing about it is if you're only doing 4 of the first color, 6 of a second color, and 4 of another color underneath that, you can actually number those as you go. And when you start chain piecing, you're always going to pick everything up in that order, and your papers are in the same order as your fabric, all right? So I'm just going to do 1 set today. And so I have, I'm going to stack both groups. This set of papers goes here. This one goes with this color. You always want to find the last section number on your foundation papers. And I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 is my very last one. And I'm going to find the template piece for number 7. Which happens to be here. Now it looks a little funny, but it's just because that was left over from my template layout sheet, and sometimes you'll end up with odd stuff. But here's actually where the piece is, okay? And if I want to make that a little bit simpler, I can actually come in and we can get rid of that excess like that, and now it looks more like a template, all right? So there's my sew side. Now the next piece I need to find is the CS6-6. And I'm going to look at my template pieces, and I'm going to go like this. Let's go back here for a second. I'm going to cut this one so that I can stack them both at the same time here. There we go. So I have a template layout sheet on this piece, but I don't on this one. So I need to know what my sew side is. So if I don't have a template piece on my stack, I always put the paper clip on the sew side, and that way I don't forget where my sew side is, right? So now we're gonna go back and we're gonna stack, and that's my sew side, so I'm gonna stack that one, and then I'm gonna stack this one while I'm doing this. My next piece is CS65, that's number 5, and these are both the same color, sew side, sew side. And then we're gonna go to number 4 template, sew side, and the sew side. My number 3 template is right here. Here's my sew side right there. So see how that's a different direction, that sew side is very important. So this is going to be the sew side here, so I'm going to actually move my paper clip to the sew side. And then we're going to find number 2 goes like this, number 2 there, and then this is number 1. And number 1 does not have a sew side, and I'll explain that as I start putting it, and then I'm going to just place that on top. Now, I like to take this and stack all of my fabrics underneath, take a big paper clip and a binder clip and clip that together. And I have one sitting right here.
You have one problem, Mom. The fabric that you stacked to start with is not the same as those two, so you need to go back and switch that.
All right, so I stacked the wrong colors, so I need to take this piece. I'm going to take these 3 pieces, these 3 pieces, and go like this, and move these pieces over here. And now I have these colors here, and I have these colors here.
All right.
So we're set now. All right, so what I like to do, my instructions tell you to mark the dash lines on the back side of the paper, and it does really help because you're able to see things. But if I don't have a pencil or something, sometimes I go through and I crease that, right? So I'm going to go through and crease my lines here, and then when I flip it over, this is my section 1 right here. And I'm just going to take, and I'm going to draw a little line there, and then we're going to draw a line here. Okay. Now I'm going to grab my very first template piece. This doesn't have a sew side, but it does go like that. And I'm going to make sure that that's centered over. And if you look, you can see where my lines are, so I have to cover that area. And then I'm going to take a fabric pin, and I'm just going to put a little bit of glue on the back of that and glue that very first piece on. Now I take my next piece and I set that right on top of that. I find section 1, put some glue on the back of it, and I just match it up. So I'm basically just restacking what I started with the very first piece. And it doesn't take a lot of glue on the back side of that. You don't want to use your repositionable glue for what I'm doing right there. You want to use an actual fabric glue. And there we go. The next step is we're going to find where line 1 is. I'm going to place my fold template on line 1, and it's the solid line. We're going to fold back the paper. We're going to take the outer quarter ruler, set it on top of it, and we're going to trim. Then I set that to the side. Then we pick up the next piece. Outer quarter, trim. Place the fold template on line 1, fold back the paper, put the outer quarter, and trim. Okay, so now I'm ready to add my next piece here. And I want to actually take this and line it up to this end. So I'm going to use the edge of my paper to line everything up. So we're going to pull the template off. And if you need that template for another piece, don't throw it away. Now we're going to pull the first piece, and I'm going to line this up right along that edge so that my paper has fabric underneath it. Now I don't have to worry about this end matching or covering because I know that my template's long enough. Then I'm going to take my next piece, match up that edge, take my next piece of paper, and make sure that the tip of my paper has fabric under it. The next one. Okay. Now I'm going to take my fabric glue pen and I'm going to lift that top piece of fabric back and put just a little bit of glue in between the two fabrics in the seam allowance. And it doesn't take much glue, just enough to hold it in place. So now when I pick up my piece, those are actually going to stay attached to my paper. We're going to move that to our machine. I'm going to downsize my stitch length on my machine to 1.8. And then I'm just going to pick up the first piece of paper and fabric. And I'm going to sew from the edge of the paper to the center of the paper on line 1. After I get past the dashed line at the end of line 1, then if I had a thread cutter, I would cut the thread. If I don't have a thread cutter, then I just lift this up, slide it over, put the next piece in place. And sew past that dashed line. I'm going to pick up the next one. And we do this for all of our whole stack. If you're using a lot of colors, you want to make sure that these stack. So I have 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And now I would actually go to the ironing board and press all of these. All right, so I'm going to be gone for a second. Okay, after pressing line 1, when I get started again, I want to make sure that number 1 is on the top because this is my number 1 fabric on the top here. So my papers are still in order. I'm going to pick up my fold template, place it on line 2, and we're going to grab our add a quarter ruler, and we're going to trim. And this is my fabric number 1, so I'm going to get my fabrics ready. And this is my sew side, so I have to lay it right on there like that. And I want to make sure that it covers. And if I'm not sure it's covering, I can open this up and I can see, here's my dashed line, that's where my seam allowance would be. And I can crease that. And then when I fold it back, I'm going to draw a line just so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to draw a line along that fold. So this area right here is what I have to have fabric under. So when I lift this, I'm going to put my finger on that line. I'm going to put the finger on the edge of the paper. And as long as I center that to where I have a little bit of fabric on both ends, I know it's going to fit down here because we designed the template so it's big enough to fit. Now we're going to take the next piece, we're going to line it up, put it about a 1/2 inch down, Stack it onto your other paper. Then you're going to fold back, trim, and another quick way that you can figure out if you don't want to draw that line, just take a pen and poke a hole right there where you need to look at that. Now I can put my finger right where I poked that hole and stack it again. Okay. Then we're going to take the next piece, put it on top. I have my fabrics all in position again, and I'm going to grab my glue pen. And on this particular one, my light fabric is setting on the bottom, so I need to pay a little bit more attention and slide that back and make sure that I can see the light fabric so that it goes past the brown, so that it doesn't create a shadow. Anytime your light is on the bottom, you need to push your light down a little bit so that you can see the edge of the light fabric along the edge of the dark fabric. And that way you don't end up with a shadow. And I'm going to give you a close-up of that. So that's the way that's going to look for you. When the dark is on the bottom, you don't have to worry about it. But when the light is the bottom piece, you've got to make sure that you can see the light along the edge of your dark fabric. All right, I'm going to just finish one piece now, and we'll set the rest of them aside. That way you don't have to watch me stack do all 6 papers at the same time. So we're going to finish up this little piece. And I'm going to sew on line 2 now. For those of you that are new to paper piecing, I'm also going to just do some finger pressing right now because I'm just working with one piece. So something to remind you is your fold line and your sew line are always the same line. So whenever you're looking at it and trying to figure out what line do I fold back on, it's always going to be the sew line. So I have a line 3 here where is the next one. So I put this right on line 3. I'm going to fold this back. Now I've already sewn this to the paper, so what I'm going to do is just tear that loose there. Just make sure that I can get that fabric to lay flat. Now I can put the add a quarter ruler on there and we can trim. Okay, so now I'm just going to sneak one piece off the bottom of my stack, and then I'm going to move the rest of the stack over here. And we're going to place this on, and we're going to make sure that I have fabric sewn on both sides. And you can tell that it's plenty long. I told you guys in the beginning in the cutting that you don't have to worry about these not fitting. They fit. We've given you a little bit of extra fabric on each one of those pieces to make sure that you have plenty of room. We're going to sew that line. I'm sewing on line 3 now. I'm going to just finger press. You're going to have a lot better luck if you press with an iron than finger pressing, because finger pressing has a tendency to leave the fabric a little bit loose under there. But when you're demoing, finger pressing works really good. But if you want really accurate blocks, go to your iron and make sure you press. So we trimmed. Now we're going to pull the bottom piece off of here and then set those aside. And my sew side, pay attention to where your sew side is. So I'm looking at this. There's my sew side. And now all I have to do is put my finger on both edges, ends of the paper, and I'm going to lay it down like that. Grab my glue. Glue those together. Finger press that again. We're going to pretend that that's a nice hot steam liner in there. And place it on line 5. Trim. Place it right there and make sure that we have fabric on both sides of the ends of the paper there. And this is probably small enough that I can sew without gluing, so I'm just going to lay it up here. Finger press. Now, I want to go over one other thing with you. So I'm doing the finger pressing, but when you're actually working with an iron and you're pressing, you want to make sure that you open up those seams. There's a lot of seams on this between block to block that actually match. And so if you don't get those seams pressed open, then you're going to have a hard time getting things to match up. And if you don't get it pressed properly, then when you take the paper off, you might end up with a wider strip there than what you're supposed to have. And that makes it difficult to match things up. We'll fold back. The other thing I like to do is when I start getting a lot of fabric along the edges, sometimes I like to go in and clean up that. Sure to center that underneath there, like that. That's light, so the light's on the bottom, so I'm going to actually let that overhang a little bit, and I'm going to glue it so it doesn't move under my pressure foot when I'm sewing. Now I'm going to quickly go press the whole block, and then I'll bring it back. Okay, we have our block sewn. Now I'm going to show you how to trim it. So you're going to flip it over like this, and you're going to take your ruler and line it up along the outside line. And you're going to trim, then you're going to rotate it. If you have a rotating mat, it works great. In. Okay, so now we have all 4 sides trimmed. And that's what our block looks like. So now I'm going to show you how to remove the paper. So you're going to place your finger right here along the edge, and then you're just going to start. And you're going to tear that back, and then you're going to loosen up the next one. Hold that. If you don't hold on to those, then you'll end up tearing that back along that as you start the tearing. And we're going to hold on to that. Just tear it off. And whether or not that paper comes off all in one tear, it really depends on the grain line of the paper, because sometimes you'll notice that it'll leave a whole bunch of little tiny pieces, and then other times it all comes off as one great big piece. And it's because of your newsprint has a grain line on it as well. So then we're going to take this. You always want to start with the last piece and work back to the first piece that you sewed on. So start with the largest number and work in reverse order. I got out of order on mine, but that's okay. There we are. All right, so when you get these blocks set together like this, all of these are set up as stacked seams. If you want to repress any of those seams, you can actually repress, and then that will give you opposing seams. So if I actually flip this block over, I could come back to my iron and I could iron each one of these like this and repress the 4 seams that come across. These seams, when we put them together, are opposing seams. So if you want to set your quilt up for opposing seams, you can repress one of your blocks, right? You don't have to, but you do have that option, right? I'm going to show you how I would assemble this. So I would actually start right here and set those first ones, because that is an opposing seam, and I can actually lock those pieces together, all right? So this is part of my seam here. See that? Well, that comes right out in that corner. So what I like to do is actually I have a little pair of scissors. This is a applique pair of scissors, and see how it's curved like that? So whenever I have a seam that actually lands like that, instead of having all those layers come into that corner, I like to trim that back. So I'll actually just take this and take my little curved scissors and clean that seam out. Now when I look, see, I don't have all of those pieces coming into my corner. So I like to go through all of my pieces, and anything that's going to come down into the corner, I'm just going to clean those off like that. It takes all of the bulk out of your pieces, every place where it's supposed to match. So we're going to do that really quick with this one. And I do that right before I get ready to sew everything up. All right, so now these pieces, actually the way this quilt is set up, fit like this, okay? You can redesign it on the wall however you want, because you can actually take them and fit them together like this. You can turn them, you can do all kinds of different things with them and create different patterns. So this is the way this one is set up. So what I'm going to do is flip it over. And I'm going to match that spot right there. And actually, I'm going to sew these two together right here. So we're going to match these. And I'm going to put just a little bit of glue right on that tip, just to kind of hold that together. And then get those corners to slide up there like that. And the idea is that you start with a matching, and then if you have to stretch it to get something to come together and lock together or to match, then you would do that. But you want to start your block where it's square there, and then on this one, I'm going to put a little bit of glue right on that tip as well to make sure that that tip is going to match. All right. Go to our machine, and I'm going to show you a few tricks that I use for doing stacked seams. So we're going to start here, and I'm going to grab a little piece of paper, and I'm going to start sewing on my paper. And I'm going to put my needle down, There we go. So it stops down. Then I'm going to lift this piece, and I'm just going to set it underneath there. And the paper will pull that piece through, and I don't have to worry about it twisting or getting caught up in the feed dogs. It's just nice and straight. And this is where I glued, so that's an opposing seam. And I'm just going to keep sewing straight. I'm going to increase my stitch length to where I'm about 2. So this seam and this seam underneath here are a stacked seam, right? And I'm going to leave them stacked. But what I want to do is actually, I'm going to fold this one back as if it's an opposing seam and tuck that in there really close, and then sew right up to that seam. And right when I get to the edge of it, then I'm going to lift my pressure foot like this, and I'm going to pull it back and hold that in position. And then sew right over the seam. And that keeps my seams together. So now when I open this up, I should have, I have a match seam where I have my opposing seam down here, and then I have a match seam here where I have my stacked seams. Now the best way to join one of these blocks is to sew 4 of them together and then continue with a 4 patch and then put 4 pieces together again, 4 blocks together, and then keep going like that rather than sewing it all into rows.
Thank you for joining Judy for her tutorial on the color spectrum block. We filmed this in basically one take with one camera, 2 people, and with minimal edits, or we would have never been able to get this content to you in a timely manner, so please bear with us as we improve our video techniques and equipment. I want to take a couple minutes to discuss Quiltster with you before we go. Visit http://www.Quiltster.com to sign up for a subscription if you don't already have one. Through the end of May, you will be able to use the coupon code SPRING2020 in all caps and one word to get a 1-month free trial of Quiltster. In the platform, you can click on the marketplace, then kits, then sort by the color spectrum pattern to find a couple of kits prepared by me that are available for purchase. We will only have 3 kits of each, so when they are gone, they are gone. But you can purchase kits for color spectrum there, and Quiltworx will cut these kits down to the template layout sheet level and sort them, label them, and bag them for you, so all you have to do is lay the layout sheets on top and cut apart the pieces on the cut line, then begin sewing. This will take all of the work out of planning the kit for you and save you hours of prep time. Additionally, if you want to use Quiltster to plan your own project, you can open it in the marketplace. There you can choose a downloadable option or a printed pattern option. The pattern will be delivered to you in the format you choose, and if you want to purchase a kit from the fabrics you selected, you can simply press the Buy Now, and a kit will be prepared for you by our fabric retail partner. If you want to try it out in your own fabrics or fabrics that you do not plan to purchase through the Quiltster marketplace, you can visit My Projects, search for Color Spectrum, and play with the layout there as well. Be sure to visit the Quiltster YouTube channel and also the Quiltster Facebook page, where you can find live demos and recorded tutorials on how to use Quiltster. We look forward to sharing other videos with you in a similar format to this in the future. Happy quilting from the Quiltworx family.